Okay, picture this. Elvis Presley, probably the most famous person on the planet at the time. Worshipped, absolutely adored on stage, very protected in his private life.
Hmm.
But underneath all that glitter, all that fame, he was apparently running from something. Something. Well, pretty fundamental. He just hated confrontation.
Hated it. Couldn't stand any kind of tension.
Yeah, exactly. If something difficult, something awkward needed saying, he'd often just send someone else to do it.
Right. He delegated the tough stuff.
And if you dared, actually challenge him face to face.
You were out pretty quickly. Just ask Red and Sunny West.
It's such a paradox, isn't it? He seemed to crave love, real connection, but at the same time, he demanded total control.
Wanted loyalty, absolutely, but couldn't handle any disagreement, any dissent.
So his world just got smaller and smaller, more isolated. Truth became, well, kind of scarce around him. What was the real price he paid for living like that?
Well, that's exactly what we want to dig into today. We're pulling back the curtain a bit, going beyond the usual story.
Looking at the fear.
Yeah, the fear, that explosive private anger that sometimes flared up, and the really high cost of spending a lifetime trying to dodge conflict.
Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. It's great to have you with us as we try to unpack this really complex side of Elvis.
And it connects nicely, actually, to our last deep dive, remember? Elvis and Ginger engagement or illusion?
Ah, yes.
Because that conversation had really hinted at some of these deeper emotional currents, didn't it? Things bubbling under the surface with Elvis.
It definitely did. It set the stage. Because today, the main thing is this intense fear of confrontation he had, this sort of volcanic temper behind closed doors, and this deep, deep need for control.
And how these forces, these powerful dynamics, really shaped his life and, arguably contributed to his downfall.
So where do we start? I mean, to really understand why he avoided confrontation so much. Where did that come from?
It seems to go way back, right back to his earliest life experiences. We're talking childhood trauma and what psychologists often call attachment issues. The biggest thing, arguably, is the death of his twin brother, Jesse, right at birth. That loss was just profound.
Creating this incredible dependency on his mother, Gladys.
Exactly. An incredibly deep bond. And from that, it seems this powerful fear of abandonment took root, a fear that kind of shattered him his whole life.
And for someone listening who isn't, super familiar with psych terms, what does attachment issues mean in practice for Elvis's day-to-day?
Good question. Basically, it means those very first bonds, especially with Gladys, and experiencing that loss so early, they sort of set a template for how he connected with people later.
Okay.
So he often needed a lot of reassurance, constant affirmation, and because he was so scared of being left, he struggled with real intimacy and definitely struggled with direct conflict.
Which then turns into this people-pleasing drive.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Driven by this massive desire to be loved, adored. And, by extension, he really hated disappointing anyone.
It's striking how people close to him saw this so clearly. Priscilla, in her book Elvis and Me, she puts it really simply. She just says, he hated unpleasantness. If there was something to avoid, he'd find a way to escape it.
So direct. And Joe Esposito said something similar, didn't he? Like, he couldn't stand hurting someone's feelings even if they'd done him wrong.
Wow. Imagine trying to navigate life like that, especially with that level of fame. It's hard to fathom, really.
It really is.
And what's fascinating, or maybe disturbing, is that this fear, this avoidance, it didn't just mean he ran away from things. It had this other side, right? This really explosive private temper.
Oh, yeah. The flip side.
Yeah.
And the stories are pretty vivid. The most famous one is probably him shooting TVs.
Right. The Robert Goulet incident.
That's the one. But there are other accounts, too. Screaming fits directed at close friends, but always behind closed doors.
Never in public.
Never. And this tendency to just smash things up in a rage, break stuff, and then just act like nothing happened.
Yes.
Like it was completely erased from memory.
Red West, who knew him so well for so long, he had that quote, didn't he? Something like, he wouldn't confront you face to face, but if he snapped, he'd go off like a bomb.
That captures it perfectly. And you have to wonder, was this just random anger? Probably not.
No.
It feels more like repressed emotion, all the stuff he wasn't dealing with directly, all the frustrations just building up and up until, well, boom.
Stemming from the fear, the need for control.
Yeah, and maybe feelings of helplessness too, as his life got bigger and maybe less his own in some ways.
So how did this actually impact his key relationships? Let's talk about Red and Sunny West. I mean, these guys weren't just employees. They were with him for, over 15 years?
Yeah, long time. Very close. But the tension It had been building for a while. There were concerns about their behavior, definitely. But the big trigger seemed to be this book they were planning to write.
The tell-all.
The tell-all. And Elvis, well, true to form.
He wouldn't fire them himself?
Nope. He sent his dad, Vernon, to do it. Never faced them directly about it.
And Vernon's reason was?
So, officially. Something vague, like cutting back payroll.
But nobody really bought that.
Insiders, people close to the situation, they believed Elvis was just furious, felt betrayed, especially about the book.
It's quite sad when you read what Sonny West said. Something like, if Elvis had just sat us down and explained things, we would have understood.
Heartbreaking, really, to be that close and then just cut off without a real conversation.
And the consequence of that specific avoidance.
Huge. It directly led them to publish Elvis, What Happened, which is the first big expose, and by all accounts, it absolutely devastated Elvis.
So that incident, it really highlights a bigger pattern, doesn't it? If you spoke up, if you challenged him.
You were probably on your way out. He needed that absolute control, especially over his inner circle. It became clear anyone who pushed back, even respectfully, often found themselves frozen out or just gone.
Joe Esposito again. Even if he was wrong, you didn't say so, not if you wanted to stay around.
Right. And think about someone like Marty Lacker. He was known for being more outspoken, right?
Yeah, he spoke his mind more.
And what happened? Gradually, he was pushed to the periphery, frozen out.
So the vibe in the Memphis Mafia, his group of friends, it must have been complicated. People said loyal, sure, but...
But also walking on eggshells. That phrase comes up a lot. They were often scared to really push back, to tell him hard truths.
So what's the dynamic there? He craves safety, right? But the way he builds it is through total control.
Exactly. He creates safety for himself by controlling everyone else's reactions, by eliminating dissent.
But what's the danger in that? I mean, for him, being surrounded only by people who agree.
Oh, the danger is massive. You create an echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
Any difficult truth, anything challenging he genuinely needed to hear about himself or his life.
Filtered out.
Completely filtered out. So you end up surrounded by, well, yes men. And that kind of environment, while it might feel safe initially, it leads straight to isolation and a really distorted view of reality.
It cut him off from genuine feedback.
Absolutely. The very thing that might have helped him. He sought comfort and control, but it ended up trapping him.
And these same patterns, this avoidance, you see it playing out in his romantic relationships too, don't you?
Oh, definitely. Look at Linda Thompson. A long, significant relationship. But how did it end?
Not with a big fight or a clear breakup talk.
No, he just drifted, emotionally pulled away, left this kind of vacuum, this silence that was never really directly addressed.
And then with Ginger Alden, the last relationship, he gives her an engagement ring.
Right, a significant gesture. But did he follow through with serious conversations about marriage, about the future, define the relationship clearly?
It seems not. He consistently avoided those deeper defining talks.
So again, you see this pattern. Major relationships often didn't end with conflict or arguments or resolution. They ended with this profound and probably really painful emotional silence, avoidance.
So pulling it all together then, what was the real ultimate cost for Elvis for living this way, constantly avoiding confrontation?
The losses were immense, really. Friendships that could have offered genuine support, honest perspectives, gone.
Access to truth.
Access to the unvarnished truth about himself, his health, his life. That was blocked off. And ultimately, I think it cost him any real shot at inner peace.
Because he was surrounded only by people who wouldn't, or maybe couldn't, push back. Tell him what he needed to hear, not just what he wanted to hear, that echo chamber again.
Exactly. And while that control gave him comfort, maybe a sense of safety in the short term, over time, it just led relentlessly to deep, deep isolation.
There's that quote from Larry Geller, his spiritual advisor. It feels so relevant here. He said something like, he was emotionally exhausted, not just from performing, but from pretending he was okay.
Wow. That hits hard, doesn't it? Pretending he was okay when he was wrestling with all this internally.
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap up the main theme here, Elvis Presley's intense fear of confrontation. It wasn't just a quirk. It fundamentally shaped everything. How he managed or mismanaged friendships, how he dodged difficult but necessary conversations, how he desperately tried to control his entire world.
And when things got tough, when challenges arose, he didn't fight or argue or engage. He just vanished. Emotionally, at least. And that pattern, that avoidance, it just left this trail of hurt feelings, confusion, unanswered questions, silence, even with the people who, really loved him.
Yeah. And, If you haven't listened to it yet, we really do recommend going back to Elvis and Ginger, Engagement or Illusion.
Our previous deep dive.
Exactly, because it really does lay down the emotional groundwork for so much of what we've talked about today.
Yeah.
You see the patterns starting to emerge there.
Yeah, it's not just about whether the engagement was real or not. It's more about looking at Elvis' consistent way of handling closeness, handling trust, handling intimacy, and how he often pulled back just when things got serious or required real vulnerability.
Right. It sets up this discussion perfectly, and maybe it leaves us all with something to think about. A question for you listening.
Yep.
How do our own fears, maybe the ones we don't always face, how do they shape our relationships? And maybe shape the truths we're willing or unwilling to let into our own lives?
That's a deep one. Definitely food for thought. Okay, so next time.
Next time, we're going to zoom in on that inner circle itself, the Memphis Mafia.
Okay. The guys around him.
Yeah, we'll be asking, who really knew Elvis? Who stayed loyal to the end? Who broke the code, like the Wests? And maybe most interestingly, why does the truth about Elvis seem to change so much depending on who's telling the story?